inside the grand mansion of Count d'Estaing. A maid named Benvenuto brought food to Leopold, the third son of the family. As she served the meal, she gently asked how he was feeling, and Leo replied that he was doing fairly well. Even though he was born into a noble house, Leo had always been physically weak and sickly, making it difficult for him to even step outside. When he was still young, his mother taught him how to make dolls, a hobby he could enjoy despite his fragile body, and over time, he became highly skilled at it. However, the d'Estaing family valued strength and combat ability above everything else, leaving no place for someone like Leo, since he was born from a different mother than his brothers. Life inside the estate only became colder after his mother passed away. Still, Leo endured everything in silence, secretly relying on a mysterious power hidden within him. The peaceful atmosphere in his room suddenly disappeared when his older brothers, Illuminati and Fiorenzo, arrived to call him to their father's office. Neither of them tried to hide their hatred toward him. They openly mocked Leo, wondering why the family continued to keep around someone they saw as useless, a boy who spent all his time making dolls instead of becoming strong. Seeing the cruel way they treated him, Ben felt worried for Leo, but he calmly admitted that, sadly, their opinion of him was not far from the truth. When Leo finally entered his father's study, Count Calogero d'Estaing immediately scolded him for arriving late. He then reminded Leo that his 15th birthday was only a week away. Calogero explained that third sons in noble families were usually married into other houses, sent to the military, or pushed into the life of an adventurer. But simply throwing Leo out of the family would raise suspicion among the other nobles, something the Count wanted to avoid. In the end, Calogero declared that he would give Leo his own territory to rule, a place known as Venter Island. Hearing this, Leo was stunned, quickly pointing out that the island was nothing more than an abandoned wasteland. When Calogero asked if he was unhappy with the decision, Illuminati quietly mocked the situation to Fiorenzo, saying their father could be incredibly cruel. According to him, Venter Island was a worthless land filled with dangerous monsters, and sending Leo there was basically the same as giving him a death sentence. Proudly bragging about his own powerful status and sword skills, Illuminati claimed that true value to the family came from strength like his. He laughed at Leo for reaching adulthood without even having a decent skill, and warned him not to end up getting eaten by monsters. Without arguing back, Leo quietly left the room and started preparing his things. Deep down, he had always expected that one day he would be forced to leave and live as an adventurer, so he had already been getting ready for that future. Normally, being granted land was considered a great honor for a noble, but Leo clearly understood the truth. Sending him to an undeveloped island like Venter was simply a disguised form of exile. As he packed, Ben rushed to stop him after hearing the news, calling out his name with worry in her voice. Leo gently reassured her, saying he would somehow survive no matter what happened. Before leaving, he revealed a secret he had hidden from the family for years. His body had actually become much healthier than before. He asked Ben to keep it hidden and hinted that he did possess a special skill, one perfectly suited for him, and something that would be extremely useful on the island. Rather than crying for him, Leo asked her to send him off with a smile. As the carriage finally began to move away from the estate, Ben could only softly whisper Leo's name and pray for his safety. During the trip, Leo discovered that she had carefully prepared a lunch for him before he left. Holding it in his hands, he realized with sadness that Ben was the only person who had come to say goodbye. Believing that Ben's kindness was enough to give him strength, Leo continued his journey by traveling through different villages using carts and walking on foot. After an entire week of traveling, he finally reached the coast. There, a boat captain named Alvaro agreed to carry him to Venter Island on his small ship. As the island slowly appeared in the distance, Alvaro asked Leo if he truly planned to live there. Leo calmly confirmed that he did, explaining that he had been assigned as the island's new lord. Hearing this, Alvaro commented that the island looked undeveloped and seemed to carry a troubled past, but he respected Leo's courage for taking on such a challenge. Once they arrived at the shore, Alvaro promised he would return once every week to check on him. After the skipper waved goodbye and sailed away, Leo began searching the island. His first goal was to find a safe place to stay, and after some exploring, he found a flat open area near a cave that seemed suitable. As he looked around, Leo thought about skills, special powers people naturally awakened by the age of 15, powers completely different from normal magic. Most people admired abilities useful for fighting monsters or defeating enemies, but Leo's skill was not meant for battle. For an entire year, he had secretly trained with it, hoping it would someday help him survive on his own. Taking a doll out of his bag, Leo quietly said that he hoped this power would become his greatest support. He placed his hand over the doll and activated his skill, Marionette. To his shock, the doll suddenly came to life. Leo remembered spending his lonely childhood making dolls while stuck in bed, only discovering at the age of 14 that he could actually move them with his power. The living doll politely bowed before introducing himself as Roy. Leo froze in disbelief since none of his dolls had ever acted this human before, let alone spoken. Roy explained that he had always been beside Leo since childhood and had waited a long time for the chance to finally speak with him. Realizing that Roy was the same doll he had once made together with his mother, Leo warmly welcomed him. Without wasting any time, the two immediately began working together to build a shelter before night arrived. Leo decided to collect wood for their shelter, though he warned Roy to stay careful since dangerous monsters were said to roam the island. To his surprise, Roy showed unbelievable strength, casually lifting massive logs that an ordinary person could never carry alone. Leo remembered using enhancement magic on the doll long ago, but even he was amazed by how powerful Roy had become. While Roy carried the heavy timber, Leo worked beside him by cutting wood with a knife. Thanks to their teamwork, the two were able to build a small but comfortable wooden house before long. As Leo walked toward another pile of logs, thanking Roy for handling most of the hard work, he failed to notice one of the logs slipping above him. Roy immediately shouted a warning, but before Leo could react, the heavy timber came crashing down. Leo fell to the ground unharmed, only to realize that Roy had protected him at the last second. In exchange, the doll's arm had been completely broken. Panicking, Leo quickly asked if Roy was okay, but Roy calmly brushed it off, saying injuries did not matter since he was only a doll. Leo strongly rejected that idea, insisting that Roy's safety was important to him. Using healing magic, he carefully repaired the damaged arm and begged Roy not to treat himself so carelessly again. Leo admitted that he still needed to become stronger and more reliable himself. Roy thanked him sincerely and confessed that Leo's existence had also saved him. Hearing those words deeply moved Leo. For the first time in his entire life, someone depended on him instead of treating him like a burden. As night arrived, the two sat together beside a warm fire. Roy watched in amazement as Leo easily created flames using magic. Leo casually explained that it was just a simple skill needed for survival. They cooked food over the fire using wooden sticks, and while spending time together, Leo began to feel as if he had gained a little brother. But the peaceful moment quickly turned funny when Leo carelessly burned his tongue on the hot food, causing Roy to gently warn him to be more careful. Even though Leo admitted that life on the island would not be easy, he still felt hopeful now that they had each other. Sadly, his calm mood lasted only a moment before he burned his tongue once again. At the same time, deep within the dark forest, a small injured cat covered in blood stood face to face with a terrifying monster that possessed multiple tails. Feeling a sudden change in the atmosphere, Roy quickly warned Leo that something dangerous was nearby. Not far away, a giant beast raised its massive paw, ready to strike down a small trapped cat with one deadly attack. Before the creature could move, Roy dashed forward at incredible speed. In a single swift motion, he swung his sword and defeated the monster instantly. Leo let out a relieved breath, thankful they had arrived before it was too late, but his relief soon turned into shock when he noticed the numbers on his skill card rapidly increasing. He remembered secretly testing his ability back at the manor and learning that whenever his dolls defeated monsters, he would gain experience as their master. The huge amount of experience he had just received proved that the creature Roy defeated was far stronger than ordinary monsters. Roy then walked over while holding several glowing magic stones and asked Leo if he should collect them. Looking at the stones, Leo explained that they appeared after monsters were defeated and could be used to power magical tools or sold for money. Although the Diste family considered such items worthless, Leo understood that on this island, these stones could become extremely valuable for survival. His attention soon shifted toward the injured cat, seeing how badly wounded it was. Leo realized it needed treatment immediately. After bringing the animal inside their newly built house, the cat growled nervously as Leo came closer. Wanting to calm it down, Leo spoke gently and promised he meant no harm before casting a healing spell. Slowly, the cat's wounds began to close, and as the pain faded away, the frightened creature finally relaxed. Leo recognized it as a Buyogato, also known as a shadow cat. These creatures were usually feared as dangerous monsters, yet this young one acted surprisingly tame and friendly. Roy commented on how calm it seemed, and Leo guessed that its gentle behavior was probably because it was still very young. Even so, deep down, he worried that its parent might eventually appear searching for its missing child. Roy asked Leo what they should do with the small cat, and Leo decided they would return it to the forest the next morning after it recovered completely. Even though the creature looked harmless now, he reminded himself that it was still a monster. The following morning, Leo woke up to the feeling of a tiny paw tapping against his face. Not long after, Roy entered the room carrying breakfast and happily commented on how energetic their little guest had become. Leo greeted him back, though he quietly warned himself not to become too emotionally attached to the cat. Roy then mentioned that the creature had spent the entire night curled up beside Leo while he slept. As Leo gently rubbed the cat's head, he started wondering if such a tiny animal could really survive the dangerous journey back through the forest on its own. But when the time finally finally came to let it go, things did not happen as expected. The small feline stubbornly refused to leave and instead walked closer to Leo, rubbing itself affectionately against his legs. Picking the cat up in his arms, Leo asked whether it truly wanted to stay with them instead of returning to its mother. The cat showed no reaction when its mother was mentioned, but the moment Leo asked if it wanted to remain by their side, the creature gave a cheerful expression. Seeing that reaction, Leo finally gave in and decided they would keep living together for now. Soon after, Leo began working on the land using a hoe to prepare the soil. The curious little cat watched every movement closely. Leo showed it the vegetable seeds he had bought during his travels and explained that he planned to start a farm on the island. As he demonstrated how to dig small holes and plant the seeds, he noticed the cat walking around the freshly turned dirt as if it was trying to help him. However, the peaceful moment suddenly changed when Leo spotted a series of huge unfamiliar footprints nearby. He quickly called Roy over, and after examining the tracks, Roy confirmed that they were fresh and most likely belonged to a monster. Realizing the danger, Leo immediately decided they needed to investigate and eliminate any threat before it could endanger their safety. When the small cat lifted its paw as if asking to come along, Leo smiled and agreed to let it join them. Following the strange footprints deeper into the area, they soon discovered a monster that looked exactly like the one Roy had defeated earlier. However, this creature was much larger and clearly furious over the death of its companion. The giant beast immediately attacked, swinging its massive paw toward them. Roy quickly blocked the strike with his sword, but Leo noticed the impact was so powerful that it almost stopped Roy's blade completely. Realizing how terrifyingly strong and fast the monster was, Leo desperately searched for a way to help instead of standing by helplessly. Suddenly, an idea came to him. He reached into his bag, pulled out 2 spare dolls, and threw them toward the monster. Activating his marionette skill, Leo controlled the dolls and used them to distract the creature. The plan worked perfectly, forcing the monster to focus on the dolls instead of Roy. The moment Leo spotted an opening, he shouted to Roy. Without hesitation, Roy rushed forward and jumped high into the air, aiming directly for the monster's head. His sword sliced deep into the creature's neck, but even while injured, the beast fought back and launched a deadly strike straight toward Leo. Roy yelled out in warning, but before the attack could hit, the little cat suddenly leaped into action. It bit down hard on the monster's arm, stopping the attack for a brief moment. That single opening was all Roy needed. Moving at incredible speed, he unleashed a series of sharp attacks and finally brought the enormous beast down for good. The cat quickly jumped back into Leo's arms while Leo stared in amazement at what they had accomplished together. He proudly praised both Roy and the cat for their bravery, but Roy replied that Leo's quick thinking and support had been just as important to their victory. Filled with gratitude, Leo decided the little cat deserved a real name. Holding the creature gently, he named it Quor. The instant the name left his mouth, a glowing magic circle suddenly appeared beneath them. Shocked, Leo realized he had accidentally formed a familiar contract, a rare magical bond created only when a human and a monster share a deep connection. Leo could not help finding it strange and ironic that being abandoned on a deserted island had led him to experience something so rare and meaningful. Leo hugged Quor warmly, officially accepting the little cat as part of his new family. Far away in the rough waters surrounding the island, a ship sailed through the crashing waves. As the island came into sight, the captain asked the young woman aboard if she wanted to stop there. Gazing silently toward the distant land, she softly whispered that he might be on the island and ordered the crew to head for shore. 2 weeks had passed since Leo first arrived on Venter Island. During that short time, not only had he gained new companions, but the area around his small house had slowly begun to improve as well. His days were constantly busy with hard work, from growing crops to hunting dangerous monsters around the island. That day also marked the second visit from the traveling merchant, Alvaro. During his previous trip, Leo had paid for supplies using magic stones, but Alvaro did not have enough money to return the proper change at the time and promised to bring it later. Now, Leo found himself curious about how much the remaining payment would actually be. As Alvaro's boat approached the shore, the cheerful merchant waved excitedly before stepping onto land. He asked Leo if anything important had changed on the island since their last meeting, and Leo simply answered that things had been fairly normal. Then, to settle the rest of the payment, Alvaro handed Leo a ring. The moment Leo saw it, his eyes widened in shock. It was a storage ring, an incredibly rare treasure that adventurers would risk everything just to obtain. Unable to hide his excitement, Leo asked if this was truly the famous magical item capable of storing objects inside a special space created through magic. Alvaro confirmed that it was and encouraged Leo to try using it himself. Curious and amazed, Leo slipped the ring onto his finger and pointed it toward a pile of items resting nearby. Leo stared in disbelief as the items instantly disappeared into the storage ring. Even though he was excited, he still Leo hesitated and asked Alvaro if he was truly okay with giving away something so valuable. With an apologetic expression, Alvaro explained what had happened. When he brought Leo's magic stones to the guild, the receptionist was shocked by how rare and high quality they were. Eventually, even the guildmaster became interested after realizing Alvaro was hiding where the stones came from. Instead of trying to force the information out of him, the guildmaster came up with another plan. He ordered Alvaro to sell the storage ring to Leo, believing it would encourage him to gather even more valuable stones in the future. In other words, although Leo was receiving the ring now, he would eventually need to repay the huge difference in value through future business deals and trade. After hearing the explanation, Leo thanked Alvaro for helping him and accepted the arrangement. Hearing that answer, Alvaro happily grabbed Leo's hand and declared that he now owed Leo a great debt. Once the merchant finally left the island, Leo looked down at the ring with mixed emotions. He had already planned to collect and sell large amounts of magic stones anyway, but now the pressure and expectations felt much heavier. Still, Leo understood just how useful the storage ring would be for developing the island faster. The biggest problem at the moment was manpower. With only Roy and 2 other dolls helping him, he still could not fully take advantage of everything the ring could offer. Standing alone in the field with one hand resting against his chin, Leo began thinking seriously about the future. He realized he needed to create more dolls to help work the land and grow crops that could be sold for profit. At the same time, he decided they also needed to hunt monsters more actively in order to gather even more magic stones. Clenching his fist with determination, Leo promised himself that he would work harder than ever. Together with Roy, he immediately began the difficult task of crafting a new group of dolls. While Leo and Roy worked on creating new dolls, their progress was constantly interrupted by Core, who kept playfully biting the wooden figures and causing trouble. Even so, Leo continued carving late into the night until exhaustion finally overcame him, causing him to fall asleep while still holding a half-finished doll in his hands. The next morning, Roy rushed into the room with urgent news. Someone had collapsed near the beach. Leo quickly followed him to the shore, where they found an unconscious man lying beside the water with a sword strapped to his back. Not long after, the stranger slowly regained consciousness. Leo immediately asked how he was feeling, but the man suddenly sat up in panic, worrying about the safety of his missing companions. He explained that a giant wave had destroyed their ship and swept everyone into the sea. Even though he was clearly injured, he tried to force himself to stand so he could search for the others. Leo warned him not to move because of his injuries, but the man insisted that his own condition did not matter while his companions were still missing. Before their conversation could continue, a young woman arrived and called out the man's name, Geo. Seeing her alive, Geo looked relieved and identified the woman as Lady Elena. Elena hurried over to him with tears of relief in her eyes, grateful that he had survived. She apologized for dragging him into such danger, but Geo firmly replied that protecting her had been his own decision. Looking at the injuries on his legs, Elena could barely hide her emotions as relief washed over her. She then explained that Leo and Roy were the ones who had rescued them. Later, inside a nearby tent, one of Leo's dolls served water to the recovering Geo. Elena sincerely thanked Leo for saving their lives and introduced herself properly. In return, Leo introduced himself and explained that he was the lord of the island. The moment Elena heard his title, she quickly tried to apologize for any disrespect she might have shown earlier. However, Leo simply laughed it off and told her not to act so formally around him. He jokingly admitted that even though he carried the title of lord, the only residents under his rule were his dolls and a few monster children living on the island. Elena looked completely shocked after hearing Leo's explanation and asked if he truly lived on the island alone without any other people nearby. Leo calmly confirmed that he was the only human living there before introducing her to Core. Soon after, Roy entered the room carrying tea and politely invited Elena to relax and recover her strength. Wanting to understand more about their situation, Leo returned to the topic of the giant wave Geo had mentioned earlier. Elena explained that they had been traveling toward an important destination when a violent storm suddenly struck their ship. According to her, they only survived because Geo risked his life to protect everyone. When Leo gently asked where they had originally been heading, he noticed Elena hesitate before answering. From her reaction, Leo guessed there was probably a secret reason behind their journey. Their elegant clothing and noble appearance also made it obvious that they were far from ordinary travelers. Realizing he might be asking too many questions while they were still exhausted, Leo picked up Quor and apologized for prying into personal matters. He encouraged the survivors to rest while he handled some work around the house. As Leo walked away together with Roy and Quor, Roy asked about the tasks Leo had mentioned earlier. Instead of answering directly, Leo headed into the kitchen and immediately began cooking. Before long, he and his dolls worked together to prepare a large variety of dishes, filling the table with an impressive feast. When Elena and the other survivors saw the meal, they stared in complete amazement at the amount of food laid out before them. Elena asked what inspired Leo to prepare such a huge banquet, and Leo simply explained that after surviving such a terrible disaster, they were probably starving. He added that he and his dolls wanted to make sure everyone could properly recover their strength. As Elena sincerely thanked him, Roy quietly leaned toward Leo and whispered his concern. He wondered if it was really wise to be this generous with their supplies, especially now that they were already carrying the burden of the expensive storage ring debt. Leo admitted that Roy had a valid point, but he still believed helping people in need was more important. Elena happened to overhear their conversation, and deeply moved by his kindness, she asked Leo why he was willing to treat complete strangers with such compassion. Leo quietly thought back on his own painful past and explained that during the darkest time in his life, someone had once reached out to help him. Because of that experience, he believed it was only right to offer the same kindness to people who were suffering. As he spoke, Quor walked over to Elena and gently rubbed its head against her affectionately. The small gesture softened Elena's expression, and she carefully picked up the cat in her arms. After a brief silence, she asked Leo if he would be willing to hear the full truth about who they really were. Elena then formally introduced herself as Elena Louison, daughter of the former head of House Louison. The moment Leo heard the name, he immediately recognized it. He remembered that the Louison family ruled the southernmost territory in the Kingdom of Vatic, a famous peninsula known for its successful fishing industry and seafood trade. Elena nodded and confirmed that his memory was correct, but her expression soon became sorrowful. She explained that only a few months earlier, her father, who had served both as the lord of their land and the head of their family, had suddenly passed away. She then recalled a memory from a rainy evening shortly before his death. That night, she had asked her father if he still planned to inspect the areas damaged by a recent storm the next morning. He replied that he did, but then smiled proudly after noticing she was still awake studying late into the night. He praised her hard work while gently reminding her not to push herself too far. Elena explained that her father had always cared deeply about the people living in his territory, and because of his example, she dreamed of becoming a leader just like him someday. Since her mother had died from illness when she was still very young, Elena had been raised entirely by her father. Though he could be strict at times, he was also incredibly caring and kind toward her. One day, he had given her a ribbon that once belonged to her mother and told her to treasure it forever. Even during the many times her father was away handling work for the territory, Elena remained devoted to her studies, hoping to someday make him proud. Life inside the manor had once been busy yet peaceful, and the servants always treated Elena with great kindness. But that happiness was destroyed during one of her father's inspection trips when a servant rushed in carrying terrible news. Her father had died. According to the report, he had lost his life in an accident while inspecting an area damaged by disaster. As Elena shared the story with tears in her eyes, she admitted to Leo just how deeply she had loved her father. Seeing her pain, Geo quietly moved closer and gently called her name, trying to comfort her. While pouring tea for everyone, Leo silently reflected on how painful it must be to lose someone so important. After listening carefully, he finally asked the question that naturally came to mind. Since Elena was the rightful heir, shouldn't she have become the next head of the family? If that was true, why had she ended up escaping on a ship instead? At that moment, another survivor joined the discussion and explained that the situation was far more complicated than it seemed. The man introduced himself as Sebastiano, Elena's loyal butler. He explained that although Elena was supposed to inherit leadership of the house once she became an adult, her uncle, Muzio, insisted on becoming her guardian in order to manage the territory until then. Confused, Leo questioned why she even needed a guardian when she was already close to adulthood. Sebastiano admitted that under normal circumstances, such an arrangement would have been unnecessary. However, after the territory suffered through repeated disasters, the people had become fearful and unstable. Using the excuse of restoring order and helping the region recover, Muzio was officially placed in control as Elena's guardian. But according to Sebastiano, Muzio revealed his true intentions almost immediately. Elena remembered standing in front of a family portrait, promising her late father that she would continue trying her best, when loud chaos suddenly erupted outside the manor. Taking advantage of the recent disasters, Muzio had raised taxes heavily on the people, claiming it was necessary for reconstruction efforts. Then, without shame, he announced that Elena would become engaged to his own son. Through that marriage, his family would eventually take control of House Louison and seize its power for themselves. Elena and the people still loyal to her strongly resisted Muzio's plan, causing months of conflict inside the family. Things finally reached their limit when Geo discovered that Muzio was secretly preparing to assassinate them. Not long after the warning, a massive explosion shook the manor. As chaos spread through the estate, Gayo helped Elena escape and urged Sebastiano to quickly guide her through a hidden passage. Meanwhile, Gayo's own men stayed behind to delay the attackers and buy them time. While running through the secret tunnels beneath the manor, Sebastiano suggested that escaping by sea was their best chance of survival. When they finally emerged from the hidden exit, Elena turned back and watched her family home burning in the distance. Tears filled her eyes as the flames consumed the place where she had spent her childhood. Thanks to Gayo's connections and Sebastiano's quick decisions, they successfully escaped onto a ship and became fugitives. But their suffering did not end there. During their journey, a violent storm attacked the ship, separating them from Gayo and leaving them drifting helplessly across the sea until they eventually reached the island. With sadness in her voice, Elena admitted that they had lost everything: their land, their home, and even their family. She then sincerely thanked Leo, respectfully calling him Lord, while expressing gratitude for welcoming strangers so warmly and sharing food with them. She also thanked him for saving Gayo, the retainer she valued most. Elena confessed that the last few months had been filled with fear and unbearable stress, and simply speaking openly about everything finally made her feel slightly relieved. As Leo quietly listened to her story, he realized that Elena was around the same age as him. Yet she had endured far more pain than most people could imagine. Even after losing so much, she still tried to remain strong and cheerful for the sake of the people around her. After thinking silently for a moment, Leo suddenly called for everyone's attention and made an unexpected proposal. He invited Elena and the others to stay on the island permanently and live there with him. The entire group froze in shock at his offer. Although Elena deeply appreciated his kindness, she explained that they had only told him the truth to prove they were trustworthy. She worried that if Muzio ever discovered where they were hiding, Leo and everyone on the island would be placed in terrible danger. Because of that, they planned to leave soon rather than bring trouble to him. Leo pointed out that since their ship had been caught in such a violent storm, Muzio had probably lost all trace of them and might even believe they were dead by now. After thinking about it, Gayo admitted that Leo's reasoning made sense and agreed that Elena would likely be much safer staying hidden on the island. Speaking honestly from his heart, Leo told them that they all shared a similar pain. Elena had lost her father, her retainers had lost the lord they served, and every one of them had been forced to leave behind their homeland. He understood the loneliness and sadness they were carrying. Although the island was still rough and undeveloped, Leo declared his dream of turning it into a true home where everyone could live peacefully together. As the island's lord, he promised to protect them, and he added that having Elena and the others by his side would give him much more confidence moving forward. Touched by his words, Elena replied that if he truly believed they could help, then they would gladly remain on the island with him. Hearing this, Leo smiled and immediately said that the first thing they needed to do was build proper homes for everyone. Sebastiano commented that constructing houses would not be an easy task, but Leo confidently told him not to worry because he had a special trick prepared for situations like this. Sometime later, Leo gathered the ship survivors and handed them a large set of construction tools before guiding them to a certain area. He explained that this would become the location of their new homes. Elena was deeply moved by his kindness, especially after realizing he planned to prepare housing not only for her group, but for the entire crew as well. Leo reassured her by explaining that with so many extra people helping, the development of the island would move much faster than before. Elena happily agreed and admitted that working together with him already felt comforting and enjoyable. Leo then clarified something important. Even though he ruled the island, he technically did not possess an official noble rank. Because of that, he asked Elena to simply call him Leo. Smiling warmly, Elena responded that in return, he should also stop speaking so formally and call her simply Elena. After sharing that friendly exchange, Leo spread out a blueprint he had drawn himself and began explaining the design he imagined for the future settlement they would build together. Leo explained that his own house would stand at the center of the settlement like a main manor, with a large town square built in front of it. Around that square, all the other homes would be arranged in a circular pattern. According to Leo, this design would allow everyone to react quickly if Elena was ever placed in danger. He planned for his house and the homes of Gayo's group to be built close together, while the strongest fighters would stay nearer to the coast to stop enemies before they could reach the village. Leo also revealed that, in the future, the entire settlement would be surrounded by a strong protective fence. However, before any of that could happen, Leo admitted that their biggest problem was the island's thick forest. Since the land was still mostly covered in trees, clearing space had to become their first priority. To make the work more efficient, he divided everyone into different teams. One group would focus on cutting down trees and building structures, including the now fully recovered Gayo. The second group would work on expanding farmland and gathering food supplies. As the work continued, Gayo pointed out that creating an entire settlement would require an enormous amount of effort. Sebastiano also expressed concern, mentioning that monsters on the island seemed to appear much more frequently than on the mainland. Because of that, he believed believed it would be dangerous for any work team to travel without strong protection. In response, Leo revealed the special solution he had been preparing. Activating his marionette skill, he summoned 3 newly created dolls named Rag, Dona, and Ol. Leo explained that these dolls could fight just like real warriors and reminded them that Roy had already defeated powerful monsters before. Gaio and Sebastiano stared in amazement, unable to believe that simple dolls could move and battle so skillfully. Leo then explained how his ability worked by pouring mana into dolls he crafted by hand. Still, he admitted that Roy was different from all the others. Unlike the rest, Roy could think, speak, and act completely on his own, something even Leo himself did not fully understand. Even so, Leo assured everyone that with the help of the dolls, their work speed would improve greatly and the safety of the survivors would also be protected. Over the following weeks, the island became full of life and non-stop activity. Under Roy's leadership, the dolls worked tirelessly to build structures, gather resources, and fight off dangerous monsters while the settlement slowly continued to grow. As the days passed, the hard work became easier because everyone shared the burden together. The group slowly settled into a peaceful routine, eating meals together and supporting one another like a family. 14 days later, everyone stepped back to admire what they had accomplished. Just as planned in Leo's blueprint, a full village now stood proudly on the island. Guided by Sebastiano, Leo walked around inspecting the finished work. He was left speechless by the incredible craftsmanship, noticing that both the buildings and even the furniture were made with amazing quality. Sebastiano looked especially proud and admitted that he had personally paid close attention to every small design detail. When they later visited the farmland, they were greeted by fields overflowing with healthy crops. Leo could hardly believe how much the island had changed in such a short time. Elena happily explained that Rag and Dona had worked tirelessly to help with the farming. Meanwhile, Gaio still could not stop being amazed by Leo's marionette skill. He boldly claimed that with such an ability, Leo could someday build not just a village, but an entire nation. Embarrassed by the praise, Leo quickly tried to give credit to everyone else instead, saying the success came from the group's hard work. However, Sebastiano interrupted him and firmly stated that organizing and leading so many people so effectively was a remarkable achievement on its own. According to him, Leo was already proving himself to be an excellent lord. Feeling shy, Leo scratched the back of his head and thanked them. Soon after, he noticed something unusual. The crops were growing far faster than they normally should. Elena and Gaio agreed, and Gaio shared his theory that the island itself might possess unique magical properties. He explained that both the rapid crop growth and the unusually large number of monsters suggested the island was overflowing with magical energy. Hearing this, Leo quickly realized how important that discovery could become. If the crops continued growing this quickly and the island kept producing valuable magic stones, they could eventually create a large and successful trading business. Just as everyone was discussing the island's future, Alvaro suddenly arrived. The merchant loudly greeted Leo as young master, while staring around in disbelief at the village that had seemingly appeared out of nowhere in only a short time. Confused, Leo asked why Alvaro had come earlier than usual. Alvaro started to explain, but before he could finish, Ben suddenly stepped out from behind him. The moment Ben saw Leo, she immediately called out his name. Leo stood frozen in shock, unable to believe that his former maid had somehow arrived on the island. Without hesitation, Ben ran toward him and tightly hugged him. Overwhelmed with relief after confirming that he was safe. Still confused, Leo quickly asked why she had come all the way there. Ben then revealed that the entire Disti territory had fallen into complete chaos. The instant the name Dista was mentioned, Elena, Gaio, and Sebastiano exchanged surprised looks. Elena suddenly realized that the Disti domain was actually the same place they had originally been traveling to before the storm destroyed their ship. Wanting to understand the situation, Leo asked Ben what exactly had happened. With a serious expression, Ben explained the terrible truth. Ever since Leo had been exiled from the family, the Dista domain had rapidly fallen toward destruction. Leo could hardly believe what he was hearing. Shocked, he asked if she truly meant that the entire territory had collapsed in less than a month. Ben sadly confirmed it. She explained that almost immediately after Leo's departure, huge numbers of monsters suddenly began attacking the land non-stop. Villages and towns across the territory suffered one disaster after another as monsters appeared in numbers nobody had ever seen before. Ben recalled a moment when several men came to report directly to Count Calogero that the Adventurers Guild could no longer handle the situation alone. The guild was losing both money and manpower while trying desperately to protect the people. They repeatedly begged the Lord for support and resources before the entire territory fell apart. However, Calogero reacted with nothing but disgust. Instead of helping, he arrogantly dismissed their pleas and questioned why someone of his status should waste time saving common villagers. In the end, he coldly ordered his subordinates to ignore the suffering of the people and leave the problem entirely to the guild because of his selfish refusal to help. The guild was eventually pushed past its limit. Having received no support from the Diste family, the Adventurers Guild officially abandoned the territory. Under the direct orders of Guildmaster Faust, the remaining adventurers were transferred to neighboring regions, leaving the Distet domain defenseless against the growing monster threat. After the Adventurers Guild abandoned the Distet territory, the ordinary citizens were left completely defenseless, and the number of deaths quickly began to rise. When Calogero heard the news, he simply clicked his tongue in annoyance instead of showing concern. He immediately ordered his own soldiers to handle the monsters while also hiring large numbers of mercenaries from outside the territory. While sitting alone in his office, Calogero angrily complained about how troublesome the common people had become. Until then, the Adventurers Guild had basically acted as the domain's main defense force without costing the Lord anything, since the villagers themselves paid for the guild's services through monster extermination requests. But after the guild left, the manor's soldiers were forced to fight the monsters directly, and many of them suffered terrible injuries. From there, the situation only became worse. To pay for the expensive mercenaries, taxes were raised to extreme levels, placing a crushing burden on the citizens. Worse still, the hired fighters had no loyalty to the land and soon began abusing and terrorizing the people themselves, causing public order to completely fall apart. Eventually, the chaos even spread into the manor. Servants were forced into hard labor or military service, and many staff members quit in protest. The few who remained behind were overwhelmed with unbearable amounts of work. Listening to all of this, Leo looked deeply shaken. Ben continued explaining that the terrible conditions eventually pushed her to make an important decision. She realized that if she was going to suffer endlessly at the manor while being separated from Leo, she would rather leave the estate behind completely and follow him instead. Fortunately, during her escape, she happened to meet Alvaro. At that point, the merchant stepped into the conversation and admitted that he now fully understood how serious the situation truly was. He explained that although he had been cautious at first because he already suspected something was wrong with Leo's situation, he soon realized bringing Ben to the island had absolutely been the right choice. According to Alvaro, it was impossible to ignore how genuinely happy Ben became every time she talked about Leo. Leo stayed silent after hearing everything, but his thoughts were racing. A troubling realization slowly formed in his mind. He began wondering if the sudden increase of monsters in the Distet territory might actually be connected to his absence. During his secret marionette training back at the estate, he had constantly hunted monsters without anyone knowing. Now that he was gone, the monster population may have grown completely out of control. Even so, Leo forced himself to stop thinking about it. Since his father had cast him out of the family, he believed there was nothing he could do anymore for the Distet territory. After hearing everything, Elena finally spoke with a heavy expression. She revealed that her grandfather had once been close friends with the former head of the Distet family, which was why she had originally planned to seek shelter there. Ben sadly replied that if the previous lord were still alive, Elena and her people would have been welcomed warmly. Unfortunately, she doubted that the current lord, Calogero, would ever show such kindness. Geo let out a deep sigh and admitted that considering how badly the Distet territory had fallen apart, arriving safely at Venter Island was nothing short of a miracle. Ben then lowered her head with guilt written across her face. She explained that her family had served the Distet lineage since the days of Leo's grandfather and owed them a great debt. Because of that, leaving the manor behind made her feel as though she had betrayed the family that once helped her ancestors. She confessed that she felt too ashamed to even stand before Leo. But despite those feelings, Ben admitted that ever since Leo had been exiled, not a single day had passed without her missing him. Through that loneliness, she finally realized what her heart truly wanted. The one person she genuinely wished to serve was Leo himself. Kneeling in front of him, Ben apologized with a trembling voice for being too afraid to follow him when he was first banished from the estate. Holding onto his hand tightly, she begged him to allow her to serve him once again. Leo immediately answered without hesitation. He warmly told her, of course, and thanked her for risking so much just to come find him. He promised that from now on, they would begin a new life together on the island. At the same time, Leo quietly realized something important. Ben was probably not the only person fleeing from the collapsing Distet territory. There were likely many others who had lost their homes and no longer knew where to go. Looking toward everyone gathered around him, Leo acknowledged that the island was still mostly an untamed wilderness. Even so, he firmly declared that they would continue developing the land no matter how difficult the challenge became. Leo declared that he would gladly accept anyone searching for shelter and promised to turn the island into a safe haven where people could finally live without fear. Raising his hand toward the sky with a bright smile, he proudly shared his dream of creating a place where everyone could find happiness and peace.